Hi, everyone. Sean Paul Ellis here from the Saturday Morning Cartoons podcast. Remember, that's morning with a U. For the month of August, we're going to be getting into some 80s cartoons that are based on toy lines. Kicking that off today, we have The Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin. And then again, in 2 weeks, we're going to have our second episode, which is going to be for Pound Puppies. I think our friend on Twitter, Slim Pickens, is excited about our Pound Puppy episode, so please get ready, friend. We have a couple quick shout-outs. We have some announcements about an upcoming giveaway that we are going to have, as well as also what are you guys getting into today on the actual episode. So for our shout-outs, I want to give a quick shout-out to Zoe on Facebook for her Swiftwind comment. We asked the question, she asked the question and gave us an answer of what Swiftwind's baby would be named, and she thinks that it would be named Breaking, as in Swiftwind is the parent, Breaking Wind. You know what? You get the joke. I'm not going to spoon feed you on this one, so thank you, Zoe. Next, we have Armand from YouTube. He had the comment that said, She-Ra is to He-Man what Miss Pac-Man is to the original Pac-Man. Both He-Man and Pac-Man came first, but She-Ra and Miss Pac-Man took it to a new level and built upon the originals. Couldn't agree with you more. And then we also have our friend from YouTube again, Ariel Gold. He comments after listening to our Last Man episode and said, nobody is talking about this. And I just finished the series this morning. Oh my God, what a good story. Could not agree with you more about how fantastic the cartoon show Last Man is. Guys, if you don't have a Verve account, it's worth getting a Verve account just to watch Last Man. It's that incredible, everyone. So thank you guys for all of your comments on social media. If you want a shout out, just let us know. Drop us a line. We are posting all the time. You can comment on there. We are happy to give you a shout out. And thank you guys for engaging and carrying and continuing the conversation with us. Giveaway news. We are doing another giveaway, and we are going to start this on August 13th. We've had some awesome contributions from some friends, and the theme is going to be our last month's show for He-Man and She-Ra. So get ready to start entering Monday, August 13th, and we'll have this all over our social media. For this, we do have a caveat that you need to be 18 plus to be able to enter, and we can only ship within the United States. And we are really sorry about that. So if you are outraged by this, truly outraged, and you happen to also own a shipping company, then let's be friends because we want to make this less cost prohibitive. So please drop us a message. Seriously, please do that because we love our overseas fans, and it sucks to only be able to ship within the United States because it is cost prohibitive. What are we in store for today for this episode about the adventures of Teddy Ruxpin? Well, I have my romantic fantasies about airships dashed into the rocks multiple times. Tony Lazzeroni confuses the characters from Teddy Ruxpin with the characters from the 100 Acre Woods. And Charlie Visconage wants you to know that you should @ him on social media, but only for very special things. All of that and more on today's episode. So without further ado, on with the show. Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoons, the weekly podcast that revisits, reviews, and ridicules some of the world's weirdest animated series, coming to you all the way from the land of Grundo by way of the island of Rolonia. I'll be your host, Sean Paul Ellis. Joining me tonight is our resident grumbling octopede, filmmaker, and podcaster, Tony Lazzeroni.
Womp womp.
Oh no.
How's it
Already,
going?
Tony? Already? Oh, wait, hold on. Guys, what's that? Crashing into the studio in his derelict airship, we have artist and podcaster Charlie Visconage.
Hey guys, great to be here.
We're just both going to do this voice for the entire podcast, Sean. I hope you're prepared for this.
We sound pretty similar, but we're actually different characters.
You are 100% the same character, and it is frustrating.
Together we have 8 legs.
Oh.
Or my hands are legs too.
You really got to come. Is that, I want to ask, is that going to be the hill that Grubby is going to die on? As he's constantly defending the fact that he's got hands or legs. It seems to be whenever it's convenient for him to just switch it up.
I think you're right. It's just like a weird, obviously it's written for laughs or played for laughs, but I don't think children understand that necessarily, or even kids would be like, "That's not funny."
It's just unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's challenging. If you are just tuning in and you have not looked at the title of this episode, gang, we are getting into Teddy Ruxpin this week, the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin. And so I want to start.
Adventures they are.
The adventures, indeed, Tony. So Teddy Ruxpin obviously has a very storied history in terms of the 80s for the toy itself. And then we also want to mention that there was a live action sort of costume and theatrical show that they did. And then there's also the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin, which we're talking about tonight. So we want to make clear differentiations about all of the different Teddy Ruxpin components.
The Ruxpin-verse, if you will.
Do not say that.
Oh, God. Marvel, don't. Please. Don't.
He's going to show up in like a Benicio del Toro collector in the background, and you're going to be like, is that bear with a cassette tape in it?
Well, or it'll be like Universal, like, we tried the Dark Universe, and that didn't go so hot, so how
now
about
we're
the
going for the
Ruxpin-verse?
the Grundoverse.
Yeah, the Grundoverse.
That nobody asked for. Please don't do that.
Yeah, no.
Oh, man.
You're going to get a lot of tweets that are like, I would like that.
I mean, maybe. I mean, I think that it seems that there are genuinely positive feelings about Teddy Ruxpin.
Shockingly.
And I don't want to dismay or discredit any of those feelings. That's fantastic. But to start tonight's conversation, I kind of want to throw this out, to us on the show. What was your relationship with Teddy Ruxpin? Did you have that nostalgic anchor? Was that something that was in your life when you were a kid?
Oh, hell no. For me, the guy across the street from me when I was a little kid, when I lived in Minnesota, my best friend at the time, Mark, he had one, and you could put the tape in and it would read the story and the mouth just moved for it. Didn't really match what was being said, just kind of moved like while it was talking, and it was pretty terrible. Like you would listen to one story. The best part was when you had to flip the tape over midway through to flip it around to get to the B side to finish the rest of the story. But it was horrifying, and like you could barely understand the little speaker because it was like coming out the butt side of the thing, so it was like sitting on top of the speaker, and it just. They don't age well. I don't know if you've seen one in the past few years, that like one of the original ones, because the fur just starts to like matte down and sort of turn gray.
Oh no!
They look demonic now. No, I didn't have a firm attachment to it, but I was definitely aware because you couldn't get away from those commercials for it. They were all over fucking everything when we were kids. But yeah, it was one of those things where I was like, I think I might want one of these. And then my friend got one. I'm like, I don't want one of these.
It's very rare to make that declaration of like, I want a toy, and then you find somebody who has that toy, and you're like, I do not want that toy. that is a toy I will not circle on my Christmas list for Toys R Us. Rest in peace, toys.
Unneeded toy.
And as a kid, I find it crazy to think that at any point in time I would have ever made that suggestion of, you know what, there's a toy that I really don't need. Because I think as a kid, there's that sense of going to a toy store and walking down all those aisles and thinking to yourself, like, oh man, like I want everything in here. Like these would all be fun things.
Well, especially thinking about, like, again, another Rest in Toys moment, the Nickelodeon Super Toy Run really lights up your dendrites to be like, I mean, bro, what if I just went in there with a card and I was like, ba, 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 ba. I mean, for me, it was always like going to the video game area and getting like Sega Genesis and Nintendo would have been my dream.
Well, I mean, in your scenario, it's always going into that section and then pulling out the little like printed out tab card that they have, and then walking to the front and be like, I would like the thing that I now have a piece of paper for.
Yeah.
I just love the kids that were like slow and choosy on that show, that would like go and take a look at it and be like, I want this one and this one. And it was mostly the girls that went through it. They would just go pick like, I want that doll. And it's like, no, you just take the whole fucking row of them.
Yeah.
You just stick that arm out and run down the aisle.
I now have a strange desire to go and watch a lot of Super Toy Run on YouTube. I guess because in my brain I was like, was there ever a kid that was like, I want this bicycle, but then struggled to get it into the cart and like lost time?
Like, whoa.
The scooter won't get in.
Jimmy,
there.
you're burning time, bro. Keep moving.
Oh,
Charlie, what was your experience with Teddy Ruxpin?
So, I hadn't thought about it for a long time, and then we were doing this episode, and I was like, do I know what that is? And so I had never seen the show, either one, but then I also watched a commercial for the toy leading up to this, and then I was like, oh, I've definitely seen this commercial because I think I might have been a little bit too young for it. I'm an 86 baby. But I do remember the commercial viscerally because I watched it again, and I was like, oh man, I remember that being a product that was in my mind at some point.
Right.
But no, I don't really have any kind of relationship with it. And I think that that's certainly, if you don't have that nostalgia lens watching the episodes that we watched today, and I don't mean to say that in a tone of voice, like there are other episodes that I think would be good, but from the episodes that we watched today,
don't want to imply
just
that.
Like, man,
don't want to imply that at all.
This is not great.
So I had friends similar to you, Tony, that had a Teddy Ruxpin. And what was always amazing to me was the fact that it had that cassette tape. And we were in the 80s when cassette tapes and like cassette singles, if you remember, like you go to a Sam Goody and they were just like, you can get 3 singles for $10. And you're like, yes, I'm going to get everything that's in here that I ever listened to on the radio and made a cheap, poor recording of off of some top 9 at 9 that was playing on a radio station that was in my area that was in or probably in around central Pennsylvania in the Harrisburg area. And so, to have that like really crisp, clear on a cassette, I say that jokingly with air quotes, recording of something that was a big deal for me. Like I was really excited when I had access to cassette tapes. And so the thing that was always interesting for me was that when you'd see somebody who gets a Teddy Ruxpin, and a friend of mine had one, but you could put any cassette tape in Teddy Ruxpin and his mouth would try to move along. So you could put like Metallica in Teddy Ruxpin, and like he'd attempt Enter Sandman. And that was kind of fun.
I want to go down that YouTube hole. See if we can find some of the fucked up things that people have had Teddy Ruxpin say.
I wonder for kids these days, because evidently there was a Teddy Ruxpin that they tried to release a couple years ago, or there was one that they released showing promo pics for, and it was like a new, updated, modern Teddy Ruxpin. And in my brain, I was like, what is it? Is it just like a solid state drive that's inside
or like
of a
SD
bear?
cards?
Yeah, that you would plug in to the bear, and then you'd have to download an app and like interact with it. I felt everything that was interesting about the Teddy Ruxpin toy came because it was something that was so tactile, because you had to remove part of his body and put in a cassette tape and then like repair his chest. And he's like the RoboCop of bears. And then you had to
Oh yeah, well they were also working on a Paul Verhoeven reboot of Teddy Ruxpin too. All just a very slick social satire.
Well, you mean Neil Blomkamp now?
He would be leading that.
Who's doing a RoboCop reboot? So if we could just message him and just be like, you should just add a bear,
right? Yeah, or do that for one of the Oates Studios short films.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be crazy.
I'd be into that.
I'd be into that too. That could actually get me to go onto Steam again and buy buy access to that. It sounds like we are coming into this evening talking about the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin with, let's say this, and let's be blunt about it. We don't necessarily have that nostalgic anchor. We're not going to be, as Charlie had mentioned, we're not going to be watching this or kind of reviewing this with that nostalgic lens. And so if you have that nostalgic lens, if that's something that you remember Teddy Ruxpin with, this was a big part of your childhood and growing up, let us know. Because we are going to be reviewing the cartoon without necessarily that lens or that filter, there are going to be some things that we missed. And so if you disagree with us, please let us know. We would love to be able to talk about that and give you a shout out in an upcoming episode.
But don't at me, bro.
Wow.
I'm just trying to sling my paintings. I don't need to hear from you if you love Teddy Ruxpin.
Oh, so as a baseline, let's talk a little bit about Teddy Ruxpin and the Teddy Ruxpin history. So Teddy Ruxpin and the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin is an American-Canadian animated television series based on Teddy Ruxpin, an animatronic teddy bear created by Ken Forsey and distributed by toy manufacturer Worlds of Wonder. It was produced for television syndication by, hey, guess what? Our buddies at Deke. Deke. With Atkinson Film Arts using many of the same voice actors used in the book and tape series that was made for the Epitomus animatronic toy. While some of the stories used in the TV series were adapted from the books, many were original and greatly expanded upon the world established there. The series differed from the traditional children's animation in that most of its 65 episodes were serialized rather than in a traditional episodic form. The show ran from September 15th of 1986 to October 23rd of 1987. In the United States, the series was originally syndicated by LBS Communications. Today, all of the international distribution rights to the series are held by Don Taffner's DLT Entertainment. Wow, Don Taffner sounds like a really interesting guy that you would just want to
did you try to get him on the show?
I messaged him, and he was too busy because guess what? He's also the guy who owns the rights to Three's Company.
So he's just sitting on a gold mine from Nick at Night reruns. He'd be like, hey, Sean, I got an idea for you. Fuck off.
That's actually what his email said.
Taffner out.
Taffner out.
His email is, hey, Sean, fuck off.
Yeah, he creates a
DLT
separate
Entertainment.
Yeah. He's like, you know what? I got a thing for IT. I just make a lot of separate email addresses.
It's weird, Tony, that you mentioned that because I own that same email address just for Gmail.
Got to get it while you can.
Hey, Sean, fuck off. I don't. If you message somebody on that, I don't know who that's going to go to. It's not me. It's not me, gang. So if you were interested, though, in learning a little bit more about the synopsis of this book and tape further expanded upon universe, Charlie's going to break it down and give you some additional context.
All right. So The Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin follows the young Teddy Ruxpin as he leaves his home on the island of Rolonia with his best friend Grubby to follow an ancient map which leads him to a collection of crystals on the mainland of Grundo. With the help of his new friend, Dr. Newton Gimmick, Teddy and Grubby discover the magical powers of what turns out to be an ancestral treasure, as well as an organization with ambitions to use it for evil known as MAVO, short for Monsters and Villains Organization. Very creative. Along the way, Teddy learns the long-lost history of his species and clues to the location of his missing father. Whoa! It gets dark. So I just started playing the Uncharted collection. I think that they ripped off a lot of this for the storyline.
Having been somebody who's played a majority of the Uncharted series, yeah, I can pretty much say that.
That's very similar.
Very accurate.
Grundo is Sully. Anyway, Uncharted fans do at me. Holla at your boy.
Because I'm trying to figure out how this.
Yeah, some of these puzzles are challenging. Wow.
Yeah. So this is interesting, and again, it's crazy that this series has spawned. It was created from an animatronic bear toy who played a cassette tape, which to me is quintessential 80s. That to me just feels perfect.
It's Space Mountain, it's Chuck E. Cheese, it's all those.
Yeah, I was thinking of the Chuck E. Cheese band.
Yeah.
We'll dig into that a little bit more because I definitely have some notes about that.
You have words. You have thoughts.
I got words on that. So and it's crazy that it created then and spawned this sort of live action like a puppet show that they had. I think it was actors in actual like puppet suits that were doing this. So we had actors in suits creating the show, and then this also was enough for them to be like, hey, guess what? We have to expand on the world of Grundo, and we need to create this Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin. And so here we are tonight, and the way that we always enter into every cartoon is through the theme song. And so I cannot wait to dig into this. Tony, we're gonna go around the horn. Tony, what are your thoughts
Overall on this one?
I mean, you can dig down as macro or as micro as you want to, because there's a lot to unpack.
This show was just the slowest moving thing I've watched in a while. And I will admit, I just came off of seeing the movie Eighth Grade. I don't know if you've seen the Bo Burnham, film,
yeah,
about a little girl. That is a slow moving film, but it's slow on purpose. This movie or this show was just slow because I think they were trying to stretch a 10-minute story to fill 20 minutes for the pilot. So they decided to throw it like a physics lesson right in the middle of it just to stretch this fucker out. I have issue with a lot of the direction of the show, but you're telling me you said before that the reviews for this have been generally pretty positive, right?
If you go on imdb.com and check out the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin, I think there's 8 or 9 reviews that are on there, and everybody is positive about what's going on, which made Bobby Anthem's job later on down in this episode, down the line, it made it very challenging to find and pick and choose some things that would be best suited for him.
I look forward to hearing all of these. No, I didn't have any kind of major emotional attachment to this or desire for this to be a good show. I came at it completely standalone, and I was horribly disappointed.
So, but for the sake of the conversation tonight, Tony,
yes,
regarding the theme song,
yes,
what were your feelings and impressions about the theme song?
The theme song for this one, it was really just bland. It's very long. It's about just shy of a minute long, running theme song that sort of just it meanders and doesn't really it's really just a reason for them to be able to show a montage of kind of interesting images from the show, which are about the only interesting images that exist in the damn show.
Right.
But yeah, it didn't do anything for me. The lyrics were vapid and useless, and yeah, just it felt like something they tossed together, especially when you put it in comparison to some of the other stuff, the Tailspin and Rescue Rangers and stuff like that were out in the same era. It's just it wasn't up there.
It's interesting because I think, to your point though, you are very correct, Tony, in saying that it is a hybrid. Well, actually, I'm sorry, it's not a hybrid. It's a mashup, as we've seen before, of sort of all the different animations. So there is no dedicated animation for this theme song. They're just recycling stuff that they have from episodes and kind of splicing it in to make sort of a curious visual for a theme song that is as you've said, kind of, I don't know, lackluster.
Yeah,
that's what might be the word.
Yeah, just it didn't do anything for me. I watched it for the first episode and then fast forwarded through it the second episode. Okay. So it may have been slightly different, but I have to believe probably not.
Oh no, they were not different. I watched both of them a couple. I watched both of them a couple times
of my life.
Yeah, and I watched a couple. I watched the 2 episodes that we watched for this evening, and then I watched the theme song a couple times, multiple times, just to make sure that I could pull everything in. So they didn't change; they were the same. So
okay,
you didn't miss anything.
How about you, Charlie? What do you think?
So interestingly enough, so the main hook is the "Come Dream with Me Tonight." So I
dream with me tonight.
Sean, I feel like you're about to say something positive about this, and I don't want that to happen. But interestingly enough, so a couple of years ago, I can't remember the title of the podcast, but it struck me. I was listening to this songwriting podcast, and the host was alleging that the use of "tonight" as a bridge or as a thing in songwriting is super lazy because it kind of it gives the promise of something later. Oh, it's nighttime. It's kind of fun. And it's a perfect 2-syllable word to throw in there. So I would assume the songwriters of this were just Jesus, I don't know, man. We're on deadline. We need something.
What are you saying, that Smashing Pumpkins song Tonight was fucking lazy? Because that was a masterpiece. Take that back.
I think the instrumentation is very nice in that. And also, I'm not a musician. I don't care. But I think I can certainly tailor that argument for further hating on Teddy Ruxpin. And it does strike me as a very lazy theme song that is just let's pull out the most exciting bits, as you said, Tony, of this otherwise slow-moving train wreck.
It's interesting because there's a little bit of synth music that they have, and then there's a small amount of drums that kick in musically. Yeah, we've talked about the visuals, so just I want to focus and I want to kind of hunker down on the actual music as well as also the vocals. So they sort of have this singing, and it's that that idea of like somebody will say a line and then you will have that line repeated multiple times by different singers. So it's not like an in the round kind of a setting. It's just everybody kind of echoing exactly whatever that last line is.
Yeah.
And there are moments, and I have to say this because I believe that this was done. This was originally penned by Ken Forsey, and the music is set by somebody named George Wilkins. And again, it's one of those things where I'm not a musician, and I don't want to harshly criticize somebody for the work that they did for this. But let's be honest, it's the voice actor who is Teddy Ruxpin singing this, and the song is, as I've mentioned before, lackluster.
Yeah.
And the challenge that they have with the song is that at one point there's sort of like this swell. There's sort of like this rousing moment where you can hear that there's like an octave change, and you can hear Teddy just go, "Fly so high," and you're like, "Don't change octaves, Teddy. Don't." You barely have the range for what you're doing right now. And in fact,
step back from that ledge, my friend.
The guy in the booth is just like, "Yeah, man, it's fine. You were good. Can I get the fuck out of here?"
Did you just do a Third Eye Blind joke on this as well?
I did.
Nice.
I did. Jumper reference right there.
But it's this moment where like he goes up this octave, and it is so out of key at this point that I can. Here's the challenge. I can get on board with the visuals. I can get on board with the music. I actually don't think the music is terrible. I think it's very whimsical, very childlike. It's very engaging, accessible. It's not something that's going to like stick in the back of your mind forever, but it works for this cartoon that's about imagination and treasure hunting and a bear and a bitching octopede who's just gonna complain for the entire fucking time, like an inventor
choice,
and an inventor who doesn't really fucking invent everything. You're just like, yeah, you know what? All of this shit kind of works into it. But I want to say this: just nail the vocals. They could have gotten a singer and not the voice actor who did Teddy Ruxpin, just to nail the vocal on this. But there are moments where he's like, "Fly so high," and you're like, "Oh God,
just
you
shy.
are singing in the key of Teddy Ruxpin right now, and it's not a good key, guys. Like, it's bad."
Like, I think, and I'm fairly certain what probably happened was they hired the guy to do like to read on the tapes, and then it was 2 years later that they actually put together this series, and so at that point in time they were probably just like, well, we'll just carry the same guy over. Hey, why don't we have you sing multiple times over the course of this series? And he's like, I'm not a singer, and so there's a lot of talk singing in this,
but I am in need of money. So.
If you want to pay me.
I guess the challenge of the thing that I don't remember is I don't remember Teddy Ruxpin, the toy, ever singing a song. I remember it being very narrative and story based in terms of what he was relaying to kids. I don't remember Teddy Ruxpin being like, "Hey kids, put that microphone up to my mouth. I got hot jams coming out." And you're like, "Ooh, please don't, Teddy."
Maybe
Please.
this was like a decision by committee to sell the toy because they're like, "Listen, he's got to sing," and it was still appropriate to smoke in the office in the mid '80s. So
I mean, it's
they're
still
doing that.
appropriate to smoke. It's not appropriate. But yeah, I mean, I guess there's a part of me that kind of thinks like, what was the thought process behind? You have all these talented voice actors and potentially singers that are at your disposal because you have a very successful toy, and your train of thought is, you know what? Let's have the guy who's not a singer sing this theme song.
Yeah.
And it's
Lowest cost solution.
maybe it was the path of least resistance for them to just get in there and make that transition and that handoff from a theme song immediately into Teddy Ruxpin being like, "Hey, we're on an adventure right now," and you're like, "Yeah, okay, great. Like, are you gonna sing out of key?" And then 10 minutes later, he's like, "I feel a song coming on." And you're like, "Please don't, Teddy.
No.
Please don't."
But then I would also expect them to back off and not use him for his own like highlighted song later in the pilot episode.
I know
that he gets a separate song that doesn't get to hide behind great instrumentation. Like, oh, it was yes. Don't have that guy sing. He doesn't need to be singing.
It's challenging. And I think the only maybe redeeming thing about the entire theme song that to me as a kid was interesting was the idea of an airship. And I think that airships have kind of always been in my brain from playing Final Fantasy video games. And it's sort of been something where I've romanticized, and I love the idea of such. And so in the theme song, when they're just like, let's fly away on an airship. And I'm like, oh, that seems so bitchin'. And then once we were exposed to the actual airship, I was like, oh, that's a fucking death trap. Like, and so it kind of ruined the notion, this like romantic idea on the airship.
They have that same stupid problem that every like blimp or like air balloon or anything like that in cartoons has, which is that it looks like a fucking patchwork. Like they have this gorgeous ship underneath. They have these really elegantly designed like fold down wheels that have like 747 style double up wheels down at the bottom so it can hold the weight. And then they just have like ropes lashed around like a shitty balloon that's been patched up with different colored like paper and whatever else they could patch onto those things. Like it just
would have been
terrible.
worth them just waiting to go on the adventure to save up for a better airship, I think.
Or just make it at least uniformly colored.
Right, yeah.
I'll be honest with you. If the entire pilot episode had just been them learning how to quilt and then quilting for 20 minutes, I would have been like, yeah, you know what? This is probably a good use of your time.
This has redeeming value. Okay. I would learn something from it.
Yeah, there would have been an actual like tangible thing that kind of came out as a result, as opposed to let's just crash this thing as many fucking times as we can. Yikes. All right. Speaking of yikes, I want to get into this animation style. Tony, what were your thoughts about the animation in the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin?
So the animation style was not terrible. It was about on par for the day. I think you could put it next to. I mean, we watched Gummy Bears not too long ago, and that's it. It felt very much like it existed in that same world. The character design was a little wonky. I felt like they didn't really know how to make this world consistent across the board. It just felt like kind of they just patchworked different things. Like they had these little gremlin type characters that had no arms and just two legs and like a little horn on the top of their head. Like it just felt like they really took what was left at the back of the artist's like doodle book and just said, oh, those last 3 pages of the crap that you couldn't put in any other show, send them over to us. We'll make them main characters in this thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's such a wide variety because they're trying to fill out an entire world.
Yeah,
they're trying to fill out an entire world, and in many cases, I will say this: some of the characters that we saw tonight, especially LB and sort of those like small fuzzy creatures that they're exposed to very early on, those are actually in the live action. And I want to also
really?
Yes, yeah, and they are like puppets. They have like little puppets and creatures and stuff like that are in there, and so those already existed outside of this cartoon. And I want to venture to say that they probably existed in the actual book and tapes as well. And so I think that everything kind of was inspired and pulled, as we mentioned, from that book and tape. And then they thought to themselves, like, oh, fuck, we got to make more crap than this? Like,
damn it.
Oh, back to the drawing board. Like, and to your point, I think it's like, let's dig into the back of that notebook and see what other crap you have.
Yeah. And I think kind of going back to those characters, there was one line in it where the LB is towing the bad guy. I forget the guy's name.
Tweeg.
Tweeg. Who he always calls Twink, which we'll get to that later. But
oh boy, yeah,
Tweeg, he's pulling Tweeg through, and they run into him. And Eddie goes, a flock of. I thought he said fucks.
It did sound like fucks. I thought that as well.
A flock of fucks.
Flock of fucks.
Then you find out later. No, he said fobs. Those were called fobs.
Those little bouncing creatures. Yeah.
Slightly worse.
Yeah.
But I mean, I had to go back because the way he said a flock of fucks was, I thought he said, what the fuck? Which would have been better. I would have appreciated that.
Candidly, at work, I have a door I can close that is fairly makes up my office fairly soundproof, and I have 2 monitors.
All right. Bragging.
Yeah, I'm a fucking king. So I was watching this at work. I'm the classic Onion article of guy with 2 screens totally not dicking around. I most certainly am on my other screen. So I was just watching this at work, but also like, oh my God. So I heard that line, Tony, and then I was like, you know what? My life is, I don't want to waste any time going back to make sure that I heard that correctly. I'm just going to let it ride, and context will fill me in later on.
I did hit rewind, but I earned it. I earned that back by skipping through the theme song.
There you go.
Oh, there you go. That's how you make up for time.
Took up no extra time in my life.
You have to play the theme song at like double time. So he's like, "Come dream with me tonight."
And it might actually be at a normal cadence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody, to your point, wouldn't sound like they
Oh my God, they all sounded like they were so medicated. I mean, we're getting a little bit further in here, but even I watched the live action commercial for the toy, and the premise is it's like a kid doing show and tell to like, it looks like first graders, and they're all so bored because school is so boring, right, guys? And then puts on the Teddy Ruxpin, and all the children are like filled with wonder, but even still, they're all speaking so slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Kids are
Just
stupid.
a child of the go-go 90s, but
They hadn't gotten to the point where they were like, oh wait, we can just show them the same thing again and Teletubby the hell out of this thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
We don't need to pay all these stupid kids.
We did have some interesting recycled animation in the second episode that we've watched tonight.
Yeah.
But Charlie, any thoughts on animation?
I mean, it just seemed very poor quality. This seemed like, so I think, like this, to me, it seems like it was clearly done in some foreign country where they sent them the storyboards and it was cheaper to do.
Yeah,
that
Canada,
way.
as I mentioned, American Canadian.
Okay.
Which, if you know anything about this show and our history, anytime somebody's like, this is a Canadian cartoon, I have cause for alarm.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So it just seemed like sort of ragged and dull. I mean, I think overall it's just like, I don't understand the emotional attachment to the show because it just seems like a passionless toy commercial.
Yeah.
Both episodes, more or less.
Wow.
It's not even a good toy commercial. Like I'm not.
No, like G.I. Joe or something, or Transformers. I mean, give me that any day.
I mean, and I will make the distinction here that we have three IPs that you've mentioned there, and I'm going to group two of those into sort of that action adventure.
That's true. It's not an apples to apples comparison.
It's not. And so in this case, this is more adventure focused, but it's I want to throw on like it's very wholesome.
So maybe like a Muppet Babies would be.
I think a Muppet Babies. Well,
an episode I previously appeared on. Go back and download it.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I want to say for animation, the interesting thing is that there are. I drew a lot of parallels to Filmation. Now, we watched Filmation last month during the month of July for He-Man and She-Ra. And so Filmation is notoriously cheap for a lot of the things that they do. And so I felt like there were a lot of moments where they were missing essential keyframes, or this was under the necessary like frames per second that your eyes would pick up, because there's a lot of jank animation. There's also a lot of moments where people's voice acting is not syncing up with any of the lips.
And they didn't care enough to try to make it better.
And and the way that they tried to go around it in the couple episodes that we've watched, as well as also in the live show that they had too, was that what they would do is they would pan away from the character, and so they would try to show shots from like a reverse angle.
Yeah.
I see.
They would show
you
somebody,
didn't see their lips moving.
They would kind of show somebody reacting, or like the back of somebody's head.
Yeah.
That was reading something, so you could kind of see the movement of what looked like or was perceived as their voice or their jaw moving and syncing up with stuff. But Teddy Ruxpin, even as you look in the final, the intro, right after the theme song, there's like a long sweeping vista that they have where they're like, hey, we're on an adventure and this is what we're doing. And Grubby's already bitching about his fucking feet arms at this,
now that you mentioned
farms. And so they have all these moments where there's these things that are there where they will try to focus as much as possible on the scenery and things that are away, as well as they also do this other trick shot where they'll put the person who's talking in the background and the back of somebody's head very high up in the foreground. And they did this a couple times on the airship where they would try to show perspective.
Yeah.
Where Gimmick would be down below and he'd be like, hey, everybody, I fucked up science. and the rest of the gang would just be kind of reacting, but because he's so small, they're not going to animate all the tiny little parts that are in there. And so it's interesting to see them try to do a lot of this stuff where they are getting away from it relatively successfully. But for anybody who's watching this, and the challenging thing is that, we're looking at this on YouTube. And so in my brain with one of these episodes, I was like, I think maybe it's just the YouTube quality. So I sought out another copy of it on YouTube and Dailymotion. Nope, same bad quality. So like I want to say maybe it was the translation from VHS to internet that kind of did it, but I don't know, gang. Tony.
So the audience will learn this later in the plugs, but I'm a student at the Harold Ramis Film School, and so one of the things we just covered recently, we were talking about in episodic, in order for television series to continue to get royalty fees for replays of syndicated shows, they have to tweak them in some way. And they have to be a certain percentage difference from the original version that they were running to this new updated version in order for them to continue to reap the royalty fees coming in from those replays of those episodes. So it is possible that some of those changes and edits and tweaks and stuff like that, or words that didn't quite line up or something like that, could have been them just saying, "Fuck it, let's cut some stuff out and just deal with the audio not being perfect, like doing it as cheaply and quickly as possible."
Oh,
I
that's
did notice
it could be.
the actual runtime for this was like 21 minutes, and I'm like, I know cartoon shows are normally shorter because they air more commercials for toys and stuff like that in between them. Than an average series. An average series is usually going to run like 24 minutes. So like at under 22, this was short.
Cartoons are usually anywhere from like 21 to, I want to say 23 and a half.
Okay, yeah. And so, but I kind of wonder how much of that was, just retrimmed or adjusted in order to be able to meet that standard for replay. Yeah, I don't know how to look that sort of thing up, because you'd have to compare like the original live aired version of these to whatever version is available online.
Oh, does that mean we'd have to travel back in time to watch the original broadcast of Teddy Ruxpin?
I don't have that kind of time.
My iPhone doesn't have signal. What do I do?
Oh no!
I'm an Android guy, Tony, but same deal.
I just to give some context to everybody listening. The contemporaries that we had that were around this time that I would kind of compare this to would be Wuzzles, Care Bears, and Muppet Babies, as you had mentioned. Okay. And then to give you some additional context, other cartoons that were out in and around this time, we also had DuckTales and Thundercats.
Oh my God, so way better.
It's crazy to think that the quality of animation could be, again, so apples to oranges as we've seen. And I want to say also as like a present day comparison, I think that Teddy Ruxpin looks a lot like one of the characters, as we've kind of alluded to early in the episode, one of the Five Nights at Freddy's characters.
Oh my God, yeah.
In some cases, I remember the toy being kind of very accessible, but he looks fucking terrifying in some of this. And his eye reactions and how he moves, it I don't know. For an anthropomorphic bear like this, it was frightening. It was a little bit creepy.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But we're kind of talking about some of these characters, so I think it's time that we transition over. So we had a couple. Oh boy, we had a couple characters, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them in the plot, which I'm dying to get to. And so I want to ask Tony, was there a favorite character? Just to level set with everybody for characters. We obviously had Teddy, we had Grubby, we had Gimmick, Newton Gimmick, we had Tweeg, and we had LB, which means lead bounder. That's what LB stood for. Because that was his motion of transportation, was like he bounded, which is like that kind of hopping motion.
Oh.
Remember in Mario Odyssey when you have to take over that one like Eskimo bear and you have to bound, and it's like press B to bound, and it's a frustrating part of the game. Yeah. So that's the mode of transportation. I only look at Charlie because he gave me Super Mario Odyssey. So I am playing the hell out of it right now. It's amazing.
I just think about Broforce. That's my one for bounding.
Oh yeah, also good.
Oh, amazing game. So, and then we have one final real character that's kind of in here that's a wood sprite named Leota.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are really kind of the characters that we have. And so, Tony, was there a favorite character kind of out of this group that you were like, that's who I want to learn more about?
I felt like it was the one who lived up to his name the most, which was Gimmick.
Like I'm Robert McGuffin.
But yeah, I mean, you have this show that is just entirely made up of like, and like animal characters or creatures, and then this random old white dude that's just kind of plodding around and doing science, and he exists as a gimmick, as a reason to, like, he's the closest. It's not a Deus Ex Machina, but he's the one that drives the whole plot forward.
He kind of is Mr. Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, pretty much.
But he is such a gimmick. He does not belong in that world. I don't understand it. So that's why he's my favorite.
It's weird because his name is Newton Deus Ex Machina Gimmick.
See, I
McGuffin
missed the
Jr.
middle name.
So it's it's
The fourth.
it's the fourth. It's a very interesting name.
Oh my god.
So that's great. So I really agree with you, Tony. So about gimmick, any particular character, Charlie, that you're like, this is the person who is interesting to me in all of this.
I mean, I think I was saying to you guys before we started. I mean, Grubby is fascinating only because he keeps playing, or they kept writing this terrible bit about his hands being feet or whatever, which is not funny, nor do I think children would understand it. He sounds possibly the most medicated vocally, and he's just an ugly worm, man. I mean,
why would you say that, Charlie?
And the other thing is that I was saying to Sean, he's like Eeyore, but no charm.
Yeah, he's a no charm Eeyore.
He just has clinical depression, but he's not trying to get it treated.
So as a part of this, and I agree with both of you about both of these characters, and I think that these are probably some of the more interesting characters in this. I kind of want to transition then into the plot along the lines of our grubby character that we've talked about, and because I want to ask the question and kind of start our conversation about the episodes that we watched for tonight. Which, if you're playing along at home, God bless you.
You're one of the 9 people who rated it highly on IMDb.
Yeah, good for you. For tonight's episode, we watched season 1, episode 1, which is called "The Treasure of Grundo," and we also watched season 1, episode 5, which is "Escape from the Treacherous Mountain," which is the highest rated episode according to IMDb with a 7.8. And so, talking about the grubby character, and also including in our titular character of Teddy Ruxpin, I want to ask the question, based on Grubby's reaction to Teddy almost all the time, consistently, was their relationship a healthy relationship? I actually kind of really feel that it was sort of a toxic relationship, because there are moments where Grubby is saying to him, I don't really want to do this. And Teddy's like, you just have to have a positive attitude about it. And then he's like, you're gonna fucking do it. You're gonna do what I say. And the entire time, Grubby's like, I don't know that I'm really on board with this. Also, I hate adventure. I'm waiting for him at moments to break and just be like, I also hate you, and I hate bears,
and I hate that you brought me on this fucking trip.
He did have that. He did have that. I should have told you this earlier. I hate adventures. Like, he actually used the word hate, which is odd for a
pretty strong
cartoon
language.
like that. Yeah. No, it said like in the middle of like a crazy, like, the thing's about to crash. I should have told you I hate adventures, but
and to your point, the actual line that he says, because I wrote all these down because these are amazing. He goes, "There's a little secret that I have to let you in on," and Teddy just goes, "What's that?" And this is as an airship is crashing.
Yeah,
he goes, "I hate adventures," and you're like, oh, which I'll say this, consistently it maps up to what they're saying originally. He goes, "Sounds like fun if you're into that sort of thing," which I'm not.
Yeah.
And you're like, holy shit, buddy. Like, I have to almost wonder why he's there.
Like, at what point does Teddy Ruxpin realize that no means no?
Yeah. This is a toxic relationship.
I'm not trying to make this out, because, I mean, you know what? Ultimately, these guys seem like they are having a good time and they are enjoying themselves.
They're 2 consenting adults, I guess. A bear and a bug.
And they're just trying to broker relationships between the species. And I'm fine with that. And I think that that's good. And, and let's be honest, Teddy Ruxpin as the toy is interesting. I think that there was a grubby toy as well.
Yeah, there was.
That they had too.
Wonder how well that sold.
Not very well, because he seemed to be again a charmless fucking Eeyore.
Yeah.
You would just come up in the aisle and he'd be like, "Don't buy me, move along."
Hey, you know what I hate? Being in this toy store. You should burn it all down.
You know what you could do?
For the insurance money.
The only time Grubby moved fast was off of toy shelves.
Oh! Yikes. Yeah, but I just, it's crazy to think that these are 2 friends out on an adventure, and Grubby is essentially telling him, no, I don't want to go on this. And the entire time, Teddy Ruxpin's like, you'll fucking do it.
Too bad.
Now flip it over to cassette B to see what else happens to you, dumbass.
Yeah, to see what else happens, bitch.
Teddy, I can't find your stop button.
He's like, I don't have a stop button.
There isn't one. You're like, ooh, settle
Damn.
down.
I've only found the button for 1/2 X.
It's still better than whatever speed they're talking at the show. So it's, it's interesting to think that, I'll say this, and I want to kind of pitch this out to you guys, is like I don't feel that this is in many cases a good relationship for either of them to have. I feel like it is kind of toxic, and I feel like Grubby just continues to complain. But again, it's sort of that Eeyore effect where there's always somebody who is, I guess, trying to be the voice of reason, but at the same time, it just comes off tonally as him complaining. And I wish, and watching this, all I want is for Grubby to be happy. Like, if he's on board with this adventure, get on board with this adventure, buddy. Like, this is your life, live it up. But the entire time, he's like, I don't want to do this. Shit, now I'm doing this. And you're like, you could walk away on those 6 legs, 2 arms at any point in time that you want to. And so I want to kind of open this up and say, what questions do you guys have from this first episode, from this pilot episode, Adventures in Grundo, that we had? Is there anything that felt unresolved? Because I think in many cases we've talked about this. Like, this episode is pretty linear and straightforward, but there's a lot to unpack.
I want to unpack the random science lessons that come in this.
Yeah.
There's a moment where you're staring over Gimmick's shoulder at a diagram explaining basic thermodynamics for like an airship and how an airship works, and it's literally just a still frame looking over his shoulder, and it's like fire, balloon, balloon, go up. Like that's all you're looking at. And then they come later to when it's flying and they can't get it to fly in the direction that they want. They come across the wood sprite, Leota, and she says, wait, I wrote the line down. I have to have this exactly right. She says, "You do understand the basic principles of aerodynamics, right?" Like, this is meant for like 6-year-old kids. I'm like, they can't even fucking say aerodynamics.
I also love this fact that this wood sprite Leota is, or she gets challenged on this. Like, she flies up to them because they land in a tree.
Yeah,
and she looks at all 3 of them and is like, "What the fuck are you guys doing in this tree? What the hell is going on here?" And they're like, "Don't lecture," and Gimmick is like, "Don't lecture me about what flying is. I'll figure it out.
I'm an old white man. Shut up, woman."
Yeah, and it is very demeaning because she then is challenged and she's like, "Don't talk to me about flying," and then flies in a circle and come back, and he's like, "Oh, okay, professor." And that to me was even more fucking condescending.
That's incredibly condescending.
Than anything else. If you okay, you dumb bitch. Like, it was like, holy fucking shit. Like, this is so rude.
Well, then further toxic, as we were talking about earlier, where he compliments her and then she's like, "Oh, well."
Yeah.
Like,
Teddy, in context, Teddy Ruxpin, he's like, "You're so pretty." And she's like, "Wait, hold up a minute. What'd you say?"
sorry, skirt. Hey, yo, Noon, why don't you get the hell off this airship? If it's rocking, don't come back.
And Grubby's like, I can't see anymore. And they're like, "Well, your feet are on your eyes."
Oh. He's like,
feet
"Oh,
arms."
also, you've been drinking turpentine and you're blind now." It's like, it was a feeble attempt to just end it all.
Oh, no.
But yeah, so when this moment happened, Tony, the physics lesson,
Which one?
well, overall, I was just
Right.
like, oh God, is this, having no context for these, I was like, oh, is this like a weird thing where every episode is going to have some sort of bizarre science lesson in it? And I'm glad.
I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, how are they just going to bury like a random like lesson of some sort in every single one of these
like
episodes?
episode 2, fulcrums.
Yeah.
or like pulleys.
Episode 3 with Gimmick, simple machines.
Right. Yeah.
Episode
We're gonna
4,
do
DNA mapping.
Episode 5, CRISPR and gene editing.
He's
They're
like, "Hey, Teddy, what's with the new arm growing out of your back?"
"Oh, it's a long story that I'm going to tell at a slow pace."
Right, and then it's just like, do 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 do.
Episode
Flip my
7,
body over to
string
side
theory.
C. You're like, tapes don't have side C's. Teddy's like, "Oh, I do now."
He's like,
Oh.
"Hey, go fuck yourself." God
I'm
damn,
a
man.
mutant bear.
Yeah.
Oh man. I think I want to say this because it is the 80s, and because these conversations weren't sort of out there. I want to say that it felt, and I'm going to go on the record saying that with 100% certainty, I feel like a lot of this dialogue was written by, and I say this in air quotes, straight white men.
Yes.
And it's challenging because, you know, a lot of it in many cases feels toxic between the characters. Like they are pulling other people along on shit that they don't want to go on, or they're condescending to other people, or they're giving really bad half-ass science lessons. Sort of like when your dad's like, well, let me explain to you about how an AC unit works. And you're like, yeah, you don't fucking know.
Right. You're not an
know.
electrician, dude.
Yeah. What are you aware of here? Like nothing. Just pay somebody else to fix it. You're going to be fine. Like nobody's doubting your masculinity in this.
Right.
But I feel like especially for Gimmick, the entire time it was like him just trying to prove his worth. It's like, you're the only inventor here. Nobody's challenging you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, except for the wood sprite.
Right. The only intelligent character who he just shouts down.
Well, you know, so we've talked about sort of the bad relationship between some of these main good guy characters, but then I want to throw out the question: is Teague or LB really a villain in this whole show? Are they actually villains? Like, are they really bad?
They don't seem that way. I think it's just the tone of voice, but really, it just is like they're just different.
If either of them is a villain, they're extremely self-aware that they are a villain. Because in the second episode, there's not so much in the first one. The second episode, they actually say all those years of lying and treachery have finally paid off. You know.
Yeah.
So they have that line, and isn't the name of the group is Monsters? Was it Monsters and Villains? What was it? Was Mavo or something like that?
Yeah,
Monsters and Villains Organization or something.
Yeah, like it's oddly self-aware, which means that neither of the characters are actually really doing anything to earn those names necessarily, or those labels or anything like that. Anytime a character is just purely evil now, I'm paying more attention to it compared to if they have some sort of reasoning. Like everybody's a hero in their own story. Like even villains are technically supposed to be like heroes in their own story. In their own mind, they're the good guy. This is not the case. Like this was Gargamel as a lizard. That's what this character was. Looked like it and acted like it.
Yeah. Now that you say that, I can see that completely.
Yeah.
And when LB was whatever Azrael the cat was.
Yeah, exactly.
During that time, yeah. Which is funny because LB is sort of like a reddish color, which is what Azrael was too. So
yeah,
I mean, I see your point. It's like they straight bit off of that Smurf style. Yeah, and we're like, we're just gonna copy paste, and then we're just gonna MS Paint tweak these guys a little bit, and kind of make them fit into the context of this show. And so
bad guys look like monks. That's what you need to.
Yep.
Dress them up.
They also have a small Air Force of early 1900s airplanes.
Yeah.
Those are flying machines.
Yeah. You know, it's funny too because this sort of goes along the lines of like the villain color theory of like you will typically see villains that are sort of in like a darker towards the end of the visible spectrum, and so like his robe is kind of like that purplish kind of color with like red accent. He's got green, which isn't terrible because typically, you know, like a Skeletor that's purple or other villains that we've seen that will be in that like blue or purple tone to kind of indicate visually that they're bad for some reason. You still get a little bit of that in this, so it's not straying far from the mark of what we've seen with other characters, and even, you know, characters that we've seen in Gummy Bears. With like some of the main bads that they had that were in that show were kind of like in purple and blue kind of was it like battle fatigues and stuff like that as well. And so it's interesting to sort of see how this translates even with some of the contemporaries that we had during this time, that was sort of a thing that everybody was like, yo, so we agreed like blue and purple are like bad guy colors, right? That's what we're doing. You know, but it's interesting because you're greeted with Tweeg, and he's firing a cannon at Newton, but like he's doing a real poor job of it.
Yeah.
He's reluctant.
Yeah, I guess to the credit of this show, the thing that's interesting to me is I want to know almost what that defining moment was between Tweeg and Gimmick that sort of set Tweeg on that path of firing that cannon. Like, what has Newton Gimmick done that was so terrible, where somebody is like, I'm just gonna fire a cannon randomly at you. 'Cause you're like, was there a failed business venture? Did he end up hurting?
Yeah, he chemically castrated him.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
It's the genophage, like in Mass Effect.
Oh my God!
They can't reproduce.
Oh boy, did not expect that coming. Oh man! All right, any final questions that we should get answered about this first episode?
Not about the first episode.
Yeah, not on the first.
Well, it sounds like you guys have some questions about the second, and so Tony, what's your question?
Yes, I want to understand the one thing is actually kind of across both episodes, but especially in the second episode, sound design in this show is bizarre. Like I the airplanes, like they obviously have access to sound libraries that actually sound like the things they're supposed to, because they have the Wilhelm scream at one point in time. They've got they've got crash sounds and sword sounds and all that stuff. But there are just some sound choices that are extremely odd. And in that second one, they've got those little I forget the name of the creatures that they're wear the masks, but they've got a horde of them coming after them. And let me recreate the sound effect that was used for an entire horde of them coming at them at once.
Okay.
That was it.
Yeah.
It's
like
one set of
Foley work.
One set of keys slightly jostled was what they used for the sound effect for those. Now add to that the sound of the aircraft, which sounded like, I wrote this down. I said, it sounds like feverish masturbation. Because it's just like a just sped up extremely fast, and it's nothing like any aircraft that I've ever heard before. Although when they dive bomb, they get the
jerker.
Yeah, they get all the normal sound effects for those, but there's just some choices that make no sense in this show, and it bothered the crap out of me.
You've never ridden on like one of those like 740 fappers?
I haven't had the privilege.
Yeah, you gotta.
Those tickets are really expensive.
Yeah, treat yourself.
But did you notice that the propeller sounds like it was either that or it was like a like
it was like the impression
like a lawnmower.
It was a kid blowing raspberries, or sort of like what the sound that everybody would make like when they're trying to impersonate like a traffic copter, and they're just like. Like, did that work? Did we get it? Are we just copy and pasting it?
And the guy in the booth again is like, sure, whatever.
Yeah, I just want to go home.
Oh,
please get the fuck out of here.
It was so half-assed. That was my biggest gripe in that second episode, and really throughout everything, kind of looking back on it. But
well, kind of going along the same lines as half-assed. And again, I was watching this on my second screen because I do want to say candidly, yesterday I tried to watch these. I was very hungover, so then I self-medicated with a little marijuana, thinking that might help. And then I, like, minute and a half in, basically just past the theme song of episode 1, I was like, no, this is not helping my hangover. This is like just accelerating it, so I had to stop. Approached it with fresh eyes today, but I was also fielding some emails in the meantime, so perhaps I missed something. But
I love how personal this review has gotten for you.
Whatever, I want the listeners to connect with me, but don't at me. Hashtag 420. And it was a tincture, just in case anybody's curious. So today, not stoned to the bone. I'm watching these again at work, and so it's so exciting because they finally get to the treasure, and all the components are like friendship, and I don't remember the rest. Yeah. But it seemed like that was very quickly glossed over. Like that should have been the focus of the episode, and then the one like fucking disappears later.
Yeah,
what is this?
Yeah, and so what we're talking about is that they're the treasures of Grundo. So there are multiple different pieces.
6, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the little diamonds that are on that wheel. Yeah,
right. That they all just have to. Then they cut themselves and drain their blood into.
Oh my god!
Consecrate the treasure.
So to your point, Charlie, there are 7 crystals of Grundo.
Oh, okay.
And so they are imagination, honesty, trust, bravery, friendship, freedom, and then the 7th one is interesting. It's called the black box.
J.J. Abrams probably watched this and came up with his whole movie writing idea.
Yeah, I don't think we saw the 7th one. I think we saw the other 6 because I remember the because there were 5 of them that actually took those little things, and so each of them picked one up and read it for its individual name for what it was, and I thought, oh, this is going to be like some sort of like Captain Planet scenario where each of them is picking up like their personal power, because like Teddy Ruxpin picks up friendship, and it's like, oh, okay. But then it gets to the last one, and they don't have a 6th character for the 6th thing, so they all just go freedom.
Yeah, it might as well have just been like America or
Sean,
Germany.
You'll appreciate this since you had to do it for one of our short films for Fair Trade. But I just had a Braveheart image in my head at that moment of you just slapping blue paint down one side of your face.
And then running down a DC street with an axe.
Yes.
A toy axe in my hand. Yikes. Now, so to give you some perspective about this, it turns out that with the 6 crystals, there's a character that we didn't see. His name is Queller, and he is the supreme oppressor of MAVO, which is sounding more and more like a boy band every time I say it.
Yeah, although Supreme Oppressor is getting real KKK for my taste.
On tour, supporting 98 Degrees.
Oh, boy. Coming to a state fair near you. So,
gotta pay the bills.
They'd be lucky for a state fair.
Yeah, man.
Jesus. So it turns out that Queller, he as the supreme oppressor of MAVO, he has the 7th, and it's in the black box, which is what they call it, and it has the ability to be able to restore or erase a memory. And so these are some parts that we didn't really get a chance to dig into.
So wait, I have a follow-up question then.
Yeah.
Does it turn out that Teddy Ruxpin has actually been on this adventure 14 times?
Is this the first Groundhog Day?
Yeah.
I mean, possibly. I mean, you have to realize that they put all these things in place, and we learned about it very early on, but there are 65 episodes.
Oh my God,
of this
why?
series. Like it made cartoon syndication number.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think that was possible that they did it. I mean, I have to think at some point they were just like stretching shit real thin.
Yeah.
Because like the first season's
or doing like Archer seasons.
Yeah.
Well, they're like, I don't know, man, they're in fucking space this season, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the first season's 35 episodes, and then season 2 just kind of makes up the rest, the final 30. And so it's interesting to see that like they had all of this stuff available, and they created this lore around this land, this Grundo. Which just, let's be honest, it just sounds weirdly sexual. It sounds like Grundle.
Does sound like Grundle.
I hear Grundle every time in the back of my head when I say it. So
there are
very
some
hard time.
weirdly sexual things throughout all of this show.
What's up? What you got going on, Tony?
The last one was I don't even remember the name of the 2 like the little prince and princess characters that show up for the.
Well, they were brother and sister.
Okay, well that would be prince and princess.
Noise.
Yeah.
That's still allowed.
Jesus Christ.
Why did you assume that?
I say it, yeah, they were brother and sister, and Charlie just goes, noise.
Hey, Game of Thrones, man.
But
not in Grundo.
Yeah.
But
Game of Grundo.
I don't know if you noticed this, but like they're like hugging each other, and they look out over it's home. And he just looks out over the horizon and winks at the horizon, not at anybody,
Ew.
not at the camera.
I don't like that.
Winks at the horizon, and I don't know what that was about. They also had a moment where one of the little creatures gets kicked out of their flying machine in the episode, and like by the big what's the monster's name that was like their friend, the woolly.
Was he?
Woolly was it or what's it or something like that?
Yeah, Woolly
WhatsApp.
Yeah, WhatsApp. It was thrown out by the app WhatsApp.
I can text my friends in Egypt.
But it just picks this little character up and throws him out, and you see he's got polka dot like underwear underneath his little kilt thing. It's like they apparently just the animators decided we need to explain this. So there's just some oddly sexual things throughout. I don't know. There was an undertone.
Well, Tony was originally a dick and balls, but then for syndication, they added the polka.
They added those. Yeah, that was part of the percentage difference so that they could get paid extra for the syndication run.
Weirdly enough, the Woolly What's-It is he's not very bright, but he's super helpful and very loyal to them. He's later revealed to then be a Snozo, which is like a legendary Yeti type character that they have that's in the world of Grundle.
And he falls off a Wile E. Coyote style cliff and survives. It's like, it's going to take a little more than falling off a mountain to kill me.
I'd have to jump from the moon back down to Grundo. Everybody knows that for a Wooly What's-It, that only the moon can kill me.
Everybody knows Wooly What's-This are nigh indestructible.
Yeah.
This is the thing about my character. I'm just going to continue to directly tell you and never show you. And then he winks.
Guess who would win in a battle between me and the sun? Me. Stop it.
That's right.
Settle
I
down.
can fuck up your planet real quick. So keep my name out your mouth.
For these 2 episodes, any final questions before we get into some user reviews?
Why, God, why?
Okay. Well, hey, guess what? Everybody. Yeah, you listening right now. Oh, man. Turns out you have opinions and you love to share them on the internet.
Ooh.
And so in order to honor and recap on some of these wonderful opinions, we're going to kick this over to longtime listener and friend of the show, Bobby Anthem, for this week's Love It or Hate It. Bobby, take it away.
This week's Love It is titled Childhood Memories from Guardian 7718 in January of 2004. It says, I can't believe that it is almost 20 years since the Teddy Ruxpin idea first surfaced. The 1986 to 1987 TV cartoon series was what got me hooked on the phenomenon. It is sad that it lasted only 1 year and new episodes never came to be to continue the adventures of the Iliop and his friends. It is very sure that Queller and Mavo would have continued their quest to stop Teddy from achieving the goal of getting the 7 crystals back to the hard-to-find city. Also, I have to assume that Teddy's new quest was to find all the other Iliops in the world to unify against what could be the world's ultimate evil. The ancient writings are the clue to my assumption. Anyway, in a remote sense, the show may return to the TV and maybe be made into DVD. And the hated is not really a hated, but more of a challenge to anyone listening. It's titled The Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin by Coca-Cola 18 in June of 2003, and it says, apart from the cartoon itself, I certainly remember the talking doll of Teddy Ruxpin that probably said all those usual one-liners. Good work, you're my friend, etc. But anyway, Teddy Ruxpin, Newton Gimmick, and Grubby the Octopede find these ancient crystals thingies and try and learn what they are. They fly around in an airship, who doesn't, going around the land of Grundo. The bad guys in this tune was the Mavo, Monsters and Villains Organization. Remember now?
And I can't believe that with all of the critical analysis that we've had, nobody's been able to put that up on YouTube and kind of echo the ideas that we've had today on this show.
Yeah.
That's what makes this content so unique, Sean.
I can't believe they haven't relaunched this series with such positive and cast Bobby Anthem as Grubby.
Oh my! I don't want Bobby Anthem as Grubby. I want Bobby Anthem. I want Bobby Ruxpin.
Bobby Ruxpin.
I want Bobby Ruxpin. Again,
That has a
guys,
nice ring to it.
It's got a nice ring to it, and it's part of our 2018 campaign, Get Bobby Animated. If you want to send us a picture of Bobby Ruxpin, I will send you a mess of stickers for Saturday morning cartoons. That is a guarantee.
Awesome. Awesome.
I will even try to draw one myself. I won't even try to. Are you trying to do a Bobby Anthem right now?
Am I trying to do a Bobby? No.
I thought you. Okay.
No, my impression of a Bobby, I can't get that.
Nobody can. That's why Bobby is so unique.
No, I can't do it.
All right, so this is the point now where we're going to do our recommendations. And so you can recommend something, and you can tell us why. You can also not recommend something and give us your justification. If you don't recommend something, you can also additionally give it the dip. And if you give it the dip, that means on this show, you Roger Rabbit style dunk it in the dip tank, and it's erased from the annals of cartoon history. And so if you know anything about Charlie, he loves to use the dip on this show. And it's
I'm a liberal dipper. I actually packed a lip, so I dipped before. I'm just kidding. That's disgusting to me. Don't at me if you like. dip tobacco.
Hashtag 420.
Hashtag 420, bro. But if you want to talk weed, also leave me alone.
I would. I'm not going to give this one the dip. I'm just going to say, do not recommend. I'm going to pull back from dip because I don't think that this was horrendously offensive, and with the right age bracket, I think this show is fine. It's unoffensive, but as somebody who watches cartoons, I will never fucking waste my time on this goddamn show ever again.
Oh, strong words.
That is my take.
Okay, all right, Charlie. How are you feeling about the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin?
Sean, I'm not feeling great about it. I feel like this was just cynically constructed by a committee and can sell out 4C to sell toys, which I'm sure they were very successful in. But watching it, it just doesn't feel like any love and joy was made into it. And I think I would rather ride my motorcycle into a wall than watch it again.
Oh my God.
So I'm going to give it the dip.
You're going to dip it. Wow. Okay.
Hashtag hands are not feet. Hashtag 420.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, think about how many blunts you can smoke.
Oh my
You need to get a local dispensary to be a sponsor on this. That'd be dope. I'll read the ad copy.
Oh, God. Well, I'm glad that you would enjoy it. I would not be able to.
No, that's okay.
So,
But,
I know.
you need money for this show. It's not free.
Thanks,
I see your setup
Thanks,
here.
Dad.
I think you're probably a couple thou in debt at least. It's a nice rig.
We're doing okay here.
Mel and I are deep in the red.
Deep in the red for podcasts. So.
I'm giving our finances the dip.
Oh, man. For the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin, I am not going to recommend it, but I'm also not going to give it the dip. And I think both of your points as a combination, I think that this, in many cases, is a joyless, lifeless cartoon for sort of the writing and sort of the toxic nature. But I also agree with sort of Tony in the sense that for kids watching this, the kind of the wholesome nature, this is maybe like a step up from having a child watch paint dry on a wall. Like it's like they're not going to get upset. They're not going to get any crazy ideas. Maybe they do some fun kind of like Crayola sketching on some things and like draw Grubby and Teddy. But like I think that this show is relatively accessible. There's no redeeming value in terms of morals or any science related fact that Gimmick's going to screw up at any point in time. But I also don't feel like this show is so super offensive. And I think because of the nostalgic anchor for specifically the toy, that alone is almost one of the main reasons that I'm not giving it the dip. So, with that being said, we are all over the board. We got Tony and I not recommending this, but also not dipping it. And we got Charlie not recommending this and liberally dipping this as much as possible. Mm-hmm. I feel like if I had the actual toy, you would have dunked it.
I would have brought my own acid into your home.
Waterboarded it in acid.
During this recording, I did a quick Google to see if I could find some images of these toys out in the wild. And
aren't they terrifying?
Found one that was missing an eye that kind of haunt my
Oh, God.
No.
I don't like that, Tony.
So, well, thank you guys so much for being here. Tony, Charlie, thank you guys so much for joining me on this adventure into the world of Grundo, into the land of Grundo. And
oh, God.
And every little bit of aged, matted, losing an eye toy ability that came along with it.
It's like the replicants in Blade Runner. He's just like, we were built, but not to last.
Oh, it's sad. It's very sad. Oh, man. So I want to, for everybody that's at home, it's just Tony showing us pictures.
Macabre images like over the Google Hang.
Gruesome images of
somebody cut his head open to see what was inside.
Yeah, it's just a tape recorder.
Do you bleed, Teddy Ruxpin?
Requiem for a bear. Yikes. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys both so much for coming on and joining me tonight for the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin and our twisted tale of toxic relationships in the land of Grundo. So I wanted to also just check and see, what are you guys happen to be promoting? What do you have that's coming up in the future? Tony, what and where can the people find you if they want to learn more about Tony Lazzeroni?
Yes. As I mentioned before, I'm currently a student at the Harold Ramis Film School at Second City in Chicago. And as following along with that process, just getting to know the students that are around me, I went ahead and started my own podcast called the Film Student Podcast. You can find us anywhere podcasts are downloaded. So if you want to check that out, you can also find me on at Film Student Pod on both Twitter and Instagram. And feel free to shoot me an email at filmstudentpod@gmail.com if you got any other questions or want to send me animations of Charlie crossed with any of these characters. I will find some Harold Ramis stickers to send to you if you send one of those to me. So we'll go ahead and put that bounty out there.
And definitely check out Tony's The Film Student Podcast. I think I'm on episode 17 with Logan.
Nice.
Just tons of fun to check out this show. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you, man.
Much appreciated.
Awesome. Charlie, where can the good folks find what you're up to, or find you specifically, and then tag you
and at me? One place where I would love it if you would at me is on my Instagram, where I upload my paintings pretty much every day, and that's at CA Visconage, CAVISCONAGE. Tony's showing us more horrifying images, ruining my plug here. So yeah, I post images of my paintings every day. They're all original, pretty affordable, and trying to make that into a full-time gig someday. So you could help me along the way, folks.
I've got my Rumble.
Yeah, you got my
image.
your Rumble
my
over there.
image from one of our early episodes that we did of, Transformers that Charlie came on. I think it was your first episode.
It was.
And so we've got that framed over in the corner too.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you can also check out my work at visconage.com. Same as the other one, VISCONAGE. Posting new stuff all the time. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Sweaty in the City. I made it before I was an artist, so I'm still sweaty though, so it's pretty accurate. And then finally, for my day job, I do a podcast called Aging Unmasked, which very radically different, is all about taboos and aging. We just released part 1 of a series about LGBT older adults and how different retirement communities are embracing them, which again, totally different from all the other stuff, but I think it's pretty compelling listening if you want something with a more serious take to it. Highly recommend checking that out. It's on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, everywhere.
Very cool. Awesome. Hey gang, I perform live improv comedy in Washington, D.C. with a group that's called Nox. That's NOX ! We perform with Washington Improv Theater. You can find tickets and times witdc.org, as well as you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Sean Paul Ellis. Want to find out what Dave's up to? You can find him on Twitter, and make sure you at him for everything we told you not to at Charlie at.
Yeah, especially hashtag 420, bro.
You can find him on Twitter at Dr. Claw MD. And you can also find him on Collider. You can find him on DaveTrumbore.com, and you can also find him on Nerdist.com. You heard him on the show, our friend Bobby Anthem. You can hear him on his paranormal podcast, Inhuman Experience. You can find them on Twitter, IEXP_podcast, and like them on Spreaker and SoundCloud. He's also the occasional third host on the THT Movie Podcast Review, which broadcasts every Saturday night at 11:30 Eastern Time on Mixlr. You can also find him on Twitter at Bobby Anthem. Send him a message. Show him some love. He's simply the best. As for this little show, oh my gosh, guys. Do you really want to be the kindest human being in the world? Just go on Apple iTunes and just rate and recommend this show. I don't even care if you give us a bad recommendation at this point. If you just
don't give the show the dip. The show comes recommended.
Yeah. Oh, well,
yes,
thank you, Charlie.
Highly recommended.
But if you guys want to, you can go on and you can recommend us on iTunes. I know everybody says that it actually really does help. Guys, it super helps out in terms of exposure. The other way you can do is you can also just message a friend and send them to any one of our social media outlets that we have. Facebook.com/Saturday Morning Cartoons. You can find us on the same exact Instagram account at Saturday Morning Cartoons. And our Twitter is different because they won't let you have a handle that's long enough. So it's at Morning Tunes. Also, any single one of these social media places that I just mentioned has a link tree. What is Linktree? You can click on Linktree and you can see a bunch of different options of where to find us online. including the fact that we are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere that fine podcasts are sold. And so you can find us there. You can rate and you can also recommend, and you can send us suggestions for cartoons that you might have. If you want to email us directly, SaturdayMorningCartoons@gmail.com. Gang, that's going to wrap up the Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin. I wanted to ask this question to go back to this wonderful theme song that we talked about. If I sing a line, can you guys echo and mirror it afterwards?
Sure.
You guys all hate that I'm making
Tony, you've expressed the same level of passion to the people who created this cartoon.
Oh,
Here we
joy.
go. That's Eeyore.
I should tell you right now, I have a secret. I hate singing.
Well, if I do this, Tony, here we go, man. Come dream with me tonight.
Come dream with me tonight.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening to Saturday Morning Cartoons. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to transform and roll out.